Welcome to Excellsior, a podcast aimed to inform the general public about immunology. Given the current pandemic novel coronavirus, the next few episodes are going to include interviews with doctors, immunologists, virologists, epidemiologists, business persons, and graduate students, where they will tell us what the data says about this new virus and describe how and why it is affecting our everyday lives. With that in mind, let's begin.
Hi, I'm Dr. Scarlett Lee. I'm a veterinarian currently pursuing a Ph.D. at Cornell University. I do research in the labs of Rudd and Brian VanderVen, where I study immunity in early life. Specifically, I look at the ability of immune cells to respond to the pathogen tuberculosis. If you're interested in following more of my thoughts on the current coronavirus outbreak, you can follow me at DVM_Scarlett, SCARLETT on Twitter.
Awesome. Thanks. So I guess we'll dive in. What is most intriguing to you right now about the coronavirus and how it's spreading?
As a immunology PhD student that studies age-related immunity, I think it is really fascinating that there's a huge disparity in response between individuals who are young and individuals who are very old. That's something we don't necessarily see with every pathogen. Some pathogens tend to impact individuals who are very young very harshly in addition to those who are old.
In the news, a lot of people are saying that the coronavirus or COVID-19 is only affecting people that are older, but it seems like that is actually not the case. So,
yeah, that's definitely not the case. And something that's important to think about is that you can still be infected by anything, and especially the coronavirus, and not necessarily show symptoms or show mild symptoms. There's a huge variation of disease that we're seeing with this virus as well. And even though initially in the news they portrayed that individuals who are young, especially even babies, were unable to become infected, we now know that even neonates can be infected with the virus.
What is considered to be a neonate?
So typically a neonate is considered to be a newborn child, and a more technical definition is an infant less than 4 weeks of age.
Have there been any cases of neonates with the new strain of coronavirus?
Yes, there have been several documented cases of coronavirus infection in neonates where they've been able to actually isolate viral nucleic acids from neonates. So yes, it is clear that neonates can be infected with the virus.
Are there any data or anecdotal comments from physicians suggesting that pregnant women are more susceptible, or?
So again, this is something that is changing on a daily basis, but this is another good sign that currently it doesn't look like pregnant women are more likely to become infected than non-pregnant women. And they also don't look like they're more likely to get more severe symptoms than non-pregnant women.
That's great news. So sometimes viruses can infect the mother and then be transmitted to the baby through the womb or through breast milk. Has there been any data or reports on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And luckily, so far, there has not been any reports of the mother passing the virus into fetus, or what we like to call vertical transmission, while the woman is still pregnant. There was one case in England where a neonate was infected right after birth, but there was no strong evidence that, again, this was happened during birth. And some more good news is that the virus has not been detected in the breast milk of infected women. So it's not believed that that's a route in which the baby can become infected.
Well, that's also exciting news, and hopefully that doesn't change. So when babies are born, are their lungs fully developed at that point, or is there like a period where it takes a certain amount for the baby's lungs to develop fully, and during that time, are they more susceptible to viral infections that would potentially maybe affect the lungs?
So a baby's lungs are mature at 36 weeks of gestation. So if the baby is born at 36 to 38 weeks or later, their lungs are mostly mature. However, I'm not aware of any studies that looked at babies born at around 36 weeks or less to see if they were more susceptible to the virus.
Do we know anything about the immune system, how it's different in babies and adults, and maybe how that could influence how they're able to fight this new virus?
So yeah, that's a great question. The immune system of babies, and especially of neonates, is very different than the immune system of adults. We have a variety of different immune cells in our bodies. And the interesting thing is that during fetal time, those immune cells come from a different pool of stem cells than immune cells produced later in life do. So all of the immune cells in a baby or in a neonate baby tend to come from a different origin than those from adult.
Immune cells in an adult come from the bone marrow, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so neonates and young babies, they come from a different spot?
Yeah, so it depends on the immune cell, but a lot of them come from fetal tissues like the fetal liver, which don't exist later on in life. So that actually impacts their ability to fight infection. And that's actually an ongoing field of research and something that we look at in the Rudd lab. And initially it was thought that the immune system early in life was deficient, but now we're starting to appreciate that the immune system early in life just responds differently to infections. They seem to respond very robustly to certain infections. However, the unfortunate thing about the neonate immune system or the fetal immune system is that they don't seem to form a memory response well. And what that means is that when you're infected with a pathogen, your body recognizes that pathogen and it keeps a few cells around after you've cleared that infection so that if you get infected by that pathogen again, you can respond to it quickly. However, if you're infected by a pathogen when you're a neonate or in utero, this memory response is impaired.
Okay, so say, for example, a neonate or an infant was infected with any pathogen, one would be including the coronavirus. It may not remember it later on in life because it doesn't have the ability to remember that pathogen.
It's possible. Again, there's been no research into this in terms of coronavirus, but that is true of other pathogens, yes. Yeah, so going on a little bit more about the novel coronavirus infection in children, I'd like to emphasize that children are still able to get infected with the coronavirus, but they do seem to get less severe symptoms. However, some still have had to be hospitalized, but luckily none of them have shown acute respiratory distress.
And what is acute respiratory distress?
So that is the form of the disease or sudden acute respiratory distress that we've seen in adults that has led to death, where they get fulminant pneumonia and their body basically is producing a lot of inflammation that causes a lot of their organs to not function correctly. So luckily we haven't seen that yet in children. So hopefully that continues to be true, but they do show some clinical signs, most commonly fever and cough. But the severe illness, again, seems to be limited to those with underlying conditions. Now, this is really interesting. A lot of children are more susceptible to other pathogens like the flu virus, even though I really don't like that people are comparing this to the flu virus because they're very different. And this is, again, one way in which flu differs. So there's been a number of hypotheses about why children are not as impacted by the coronavirus. And of course, these are all hypotheses and we don't know what's true currently. But just to talk about some of the ones that are more interesting. So I've seen recently is that melatonin, which is a hormone that regulates the sleep-wake cycle, is known to be upregulated early in life. And basically, it's upregulated in children and decreases as you go into adolescence and as you become an adult. And when you're older, you produce very little melatonin. And so melatonin is actually known to decrease inflammatory immune responses. So this has been one hypothesis because children have much more melatonin. Interestingly, too, the immune system early in life, especially when you're very young, similar to the pregnant immune system, kind of veers more towards the regulatory side of things. So your body doesn't respond very strongly to pathogens because you have a specific type of immune cell. These cells exist early on in life to help you tolerate your own organs. And so early on in life, you have more of these cells than later on in life.
So like more Tregs?
Exactly. So especially in the fetus, they have a very high of their T cells, almost 30, 40, 50% of them are Tregs. And that decreases as you age. So some other things that have been posited is that children, maybe the way they partake in activities, the fact that they travel less, all might make them less likely to contract the virus. Of course, these are all hypotheses, and in the future, I know that there will be tons of studies, both epidemiological and immunological, to look at what the underlying reason is for this difference in infection between adults and children.
So what I thought, you know how when you're pregnant, you have kind of a suppressed immune system? Have you thought of maybe that can also play a factor in pregnant women are less susceptible to getting like a strong reaction to coronavirus?
Yeah, so that's something I've thought about too. Again, that type of T cell, the T regulatory cell, is high in pregnant women. It's a T cell so that they tolerate their fetus and don't reject their fetus. And again, that does help stop a lot of inflammation. So yeah, I've definitely thought that that's one similarity. And again, it's also known that pregnant women have a lot of melatonin. So that's been another reason that people have thought that maybe this is occurred.
So from what I've read is that people are dying from cytokine storms in lung, and is that an overreaction?
So from what I've read in some preprint journals, so those are academic journals that have not been peer reviewed, it seems like the cytokine storm might be caused by two types of T cells. A Th17 cell, which is a type of immune cell that's normally known for causing autoimmune disorders, and a CD8 T cell, or what you may know as a killer T cell. So these two types of cells are producing lots of cytokines, or basically an inflammatory stimulus that's causing just too much inflammation for the body to handle.
So what I've read also on bioRxiv was that there was more senescent cells, so CD4 and CD8. I don't know which specific CD4, it may have just been a blanket, but in patients that were having infection.
Yeah, I did see that article as well. So something that's also clear about these patients is that they're leukopenic, which is a fancy word to say that they don't have a lot of white blood cells or T cells in their body. And the ones that are there seem to be displaying markers indicating that they're not, after infection, capable of producing more cytokines or responding to more infection. Something else about children being impacted differently than adults is that they have something else that we've thought about with other infections is that hormone levels are very different in terms of sex hormones in children. For instance, testosterone and estrogen are produced at very different ratios and amounts early on in life. And this is something that could also possibly, this is the hypothesis, of course, contribute to some of the differences we're seeing. And also, it seems like males are more predisposed to getting more fulminant or worse disease in this case too, and that it could also be hormone related. A lot of the immune cells actually have receptors on them to respond to sex hormones. So
I heard that in terms of infectious diseases, men are generally just always more likely to be affected.
That does seem to be true for most infectious diseases, yes, that men are more predisposed. And that's also true for, tuberculosis, which I study. So, it's very interesting. Again, we don't necessarily know why that's true, that males seem to be more susceptible to a lot of diseases. It could be related to hormones. It could not be. It really depends.
So, what would you have to say for women that are pregnant or that have, really young kids at home? They're just scared. What advice do you have?
Yeah, so for a pregnant woman, I would say that the evidence so far is, I wouldn't say that it's positive, but it's not overly negative. It doesn't seem like pregnant women are more susceptible to the coronavirus. And so for a pregnant woman, I would advise them to act like any individual in this case, to stay at home as much as possible and to limit their exposure to other people. If they do that, then hopefully they will not become infected. In terms of people with children, I think they should behave like their children can become infected with the disease. We have seen, at first a lot of people were opposed to schools closing, but now we know that children can be infected. Something else that is currently not known is how children contribute to the spread of disease, if they're shedding the virus at high rates or low rates. So that's another unknown currently. But I would say, act like your children are adults and have them behave in the same way. Stay at home as much as possible. No play dates. No exposure to individuals who are not in your home normally.
This is not a mini vacation.
Exactly. This is not a mini vacation. I know this is very difficult for children to understand, but it's very important for both your child and for others. I mean, and even if they're not showing the worst parts of the disease, some children are showing signs of disease and have had to go to the doctor to get intravenous fluids or other measures. So it can be, more serious than a normal flu in some children. So stay at home, keep your children busy, but inside.
Thank you, Scarlett, for your time and the advice for the general people. Hopefully that reassures them that it's going to be okay.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me. And yes, again, if you want to stay up to date with me, follow me at Twitter at DVM_Scarlett, and I will try to post when I find more information out about pregnant women and children and how this relates to the novel coronavirus.
Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone that listened, and stay tuned for the next episode.